Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the 2014 Small Business Forum. My name is Eric Conley, and I'm a senior marketing student here at Lasell. I'm honored to be here on behalf of the Small Business Institute of Lasell College. The SBI at Lasell works to connect students with local small businesses through connected learning activities. As we know, small businesses are essential to our economic success. The SBI and the Needham Chamber of Commerce have gathered us here to kick off Small Business Month. We are lucky enough to be joined by 6 candidates for the Massachusetts governor who will be discussing the roles and impact of small businesses in the economic development of Massachusetts and their vision for supporting them. So right now I'm just going to run through today's agenda really quick. After the introductions, we are going to have opening statements from each of the candidates, and then Greg Riedman, the president of the Needham Chamber of Commerce, is going to be running the panel discussion. And after that, we just ask that you please stay behind for a few minutes for a moment of thanks and then a quick networking period. And right now, I'm going to hand it off to Michael Alexander, the president of Lasell College.
Good morning and welcome to Lasell College on this beautiful spring day. We like to say the sun always shines on Lasell College, even when it's raining outside. I'd like to give a welcome to the members of the Needham Chamber of Commerce and our gubernatorial candidates as we kick off Small Business Month with a discussion about the role and impact of small business in the economic development of Massachusetts. Now, I have some standing to talk about this subject. I was a founder of a small business called Echo Bridge Entertainment, which is located right on the Needham-Newton line. That was in 2003. It's still a thriving business, going strong. Today it's about $63 million in revenues and $15 million in cash flow. It also happens to be over-leveraged, a condition some of you may be able to relate to. For about 5 years now, behind the leadership of Professor Hector Iwaka, Lasell College has been collaborating with the Chamber to conduct research relating to the challenges of small business organizations in Newton and Needham. This kind of collaboration is both central to and crucial to our connected learning educational philosophy. It allows our students to practice the work of their fields of study, whether that be accounting, marketing, management, or organizational development. And we hope and expect that the small business owners are receiving benefit from our students' efforts and work product. Now, it may not surprise you to learn that many of our graduates are interested in starting small businesses. We have a thriving entrepreneurship major led by exciting young faculty members like Professor Weka and Professor Loredana Padurian. But new businesses are just as likely to spring out of other programs, such as a personal training business by an exercise science major, or a handbag design and sales business by a fashion major, or a publicity and promotion business by 2 graduates partnering together, one a public relations major and the other a graphic design major. Lasell College and Lasell Village are small businesses themselves. Together, they represent about $95 million in revenue, and we calculate a direct impact on the local economy of $46 million a year and an indirect effect of a multiple of that amount. We understand that small businesses drive the economy of our country and are vital to its future. Therefore, we look forward to continuing to work with you for years to come. Now, I wouldn't be doing my job if I didn't subject you to a little bit of promotion about Lasell, because all of you may not be quite up to date. In my 7 years here, Lasell College has really been on a roll. The undergraduate population has grown 40%. The graduate population, there were about 40 students 7 years ago. There are 421 graduate students here this semester. The full-time faculty has grown 60%. We've really, at a time that's been a challenging time for small colleges, we've really been going places. And that is, so we appreciate our role in Newton, think we're contributing a lot, and we get a lot from Newton. And that also expands to the whole local area. We are proud of the kind of education we provide to our students. We have the benefits of a lot of small colleges that students can operate and work directly with faculty members around academic work. I dare say every Lasell College graduate has at least one faculty mentor. But That's true of a lot of small colleges. What we think distinguishes us is our connected learning philosophy, our educational philosophy in which we expect and ask students to practice the work of their field from the day they get here to the time they leave. And that's one of the ways that the Small Institute comes into play, because it is a vehicle through which our business students can do that. Lasell Village, I also want to welcome our villagers who are here and are participating with us today. Lasell Village is, I think, the premier continuing care retirement community in the area. Why do I say that? Because it's unique among retirement communities in that the residents there are required to take 450 hours per year of educational coursework. There is not another retirement community in the country that operates in that fashion. And it makes it a much more interactive, exciting, vital place than any other place you'll visit. If you don't know about it, I urge you to learn about it and come to visit. Today's seminar focuses on the impact of small businesses on economic development in Massachusetts and how the state government can best support this vital and important segment of our economy. I know we look forward to hearing what our distinguished guests have to say on that subject. Please enjoy today's event and welcome to Lasell College. Thank you.
Hi, good morning. My name is Greg Reedman. I'm president of York Chamber of Commerce, and I want to thank you all for being here this morning. President Alexander, thank you so much to you and to the entire college for being such great hosts and partners with us. Professor Wecca and his staff have done a great job. And I did want to encourage, for those of you standing in the back, these folks came a long way, you all came a long way. Feel free to move closer so we can have a better conversation. We'd love to have you move in, fill in some of the seats. I mentioned we do a lot of work with Lasell, and I did want to mention one commercial from the Chamber. We have our upcoming Taste of Newton and Needham happening on Monday night. 40 restaurants, a great opportunity to support local businesses and be there. We'd love to have you at the Newton Marriott on Monday night. I also want to thank Eastern Bank for being our sponsor today, and I want to in particular thank Glenn Rosengard and Lance Reagan are both here. Thank you very much for your support. Also, thanks to New TV, another sponsor who helped sponsor breakfast this morning. And New TV is recording here as well as Lasell College, so you'll be able to see this again on New TV, on newtv.org, and on the Chamber website. I wanted to also recognize some of my board members who are here. I believe Shauna Guerin, chairman of our board, is in the audience. And I know I've seen Chris Teachout, Josephine McNeil, Joe DeVito, and Russ Stein, all from my board of directors, and I appreciate you being here with us this morning. And finally, I want to thank the candidates. You know, politicians get have a tough time sometimes getting beat up all the time, but truly, the men and women here are really doing this for really genuinely good reasons. And there's only going to be one winner in November, and here they are devoting so much of their time, month after month, morning, day, noon, evening, to be out there and work, and their families give up their time with them, and appreciate all that you do and your commitment to the issues. Thank you very much for doing that. As President Alexander mentioned, the official title of this event is The Role and Impact of Small Business and Economic Development in Massachusetts. That's a short way of saying we're going to talk about business and talk about small business. And as tempting as it may be to get into some other topics, we're going to not do that. So when you think about your questions, and we will have an opportunity for you all to ask questions, please limit your questions to those related to business and the economy. Each candidate's going to have 2 minutes to speak now, and we will time that. The candidates, there's lights over there. When you see the yellow light, you have 30 seconds left. You're welcome to come to the podium to make your statement, and then I will be asking some questions, and also, like I said, taking some questions from you. If you're tweeting this morning, and I hope you are, please use the hashtag #MAGov so we can all follow along. And when we do come back for our informal conversation, candidates, we won't have a timing, but we will ask that you don't filibuster. We'll ask that we're not, rather than going the usual way down the line and giving everyone equal time, I think I found those where you go down the line, it puts the audience to sleep, puts me to sleep, puts you to sleep. We'll just hope you have a conversation. If you have something to say, you'll join in and be respectful of everyone. So right now, I'd like to, you're going to introduce the candidates, right? So Eric's going to come back up and introduce the candidates. Thank you.
So as Greg said, each candidate's just going to have 2 minutes for a quick introduction. First up, we have Joe Avalone, a Democrat from Wellesley, running for governor of Massachusetts. Joe has served in various management and leadership roles throughout his distinguished private and public sector career. including surgeon, entrepreneur, healthcare executive, selectman, and lieutenant commander in the U.S. Navy Reserves.
Thanks very much, Greg, and thanks all of you for being here this morning. My thanks to President Alexander and to Greg and to the Needham Chamber of Commerce. I really congratulate all of you on your efforts to help bring new opportunity to our region and our area, and essentially to create opportunity for young people. I am Joe Avalone. I'm running for governor because, like all of you, I want to give back. I love Massachusetts, and I know that we should try and create the best Commonwealth we can to create opportunity for every single person. That's my commitment. That's why I'm a Democrat. That's why I'm running. I spent my life, though, in the private sector, like I think most of you. I was a surgeon, as was mentioned, and I've been a healthcare manager in various organizations. I was the COO of Blue Cross back in the 90s when we controlled healthcare costs and modernized it. And I've been running a very large global international division of an international medical research company over the last 7 years. And that's taught me what we're going to need to do to bring new businesses here. And maybe most important to this audience, I have run a startup here in Massachusetts for over 7 years using the internet. I know, having run now for 14 months and been in 140 cities and towns, that what we need in the Commonwealth is jobs, lots of jobs. And jobs in particular in our older so-called gateway cities, the older urban areas that are in decline. And there's two ways that we need to focus on the creation of jobs that the state should focus on. The first is making sure we have the right job skills, and we don't today. We have 100,000 unfilled jobs in our state at the same time that we still have 10% unemployment in many of our older gateway cities. There's a huge mismatch, and it's around the middle skills. It's around the mid-level entry skills. It's around the good middle-class jobs that we need to have to create. And so we need to use our community and state colleges and vocational schools in a much more strategic way in order to do that. That's been my experience running a global business. We also need to create an environment that's conducive to small business growth. That means a stable tax structure. I won't raise taxes. That means controlling healthcare costs. I will control healthcare costs. And it means a much more simplified permitting process. The next governor needs to focus on these two things in order to create the right kind of environment, to create opportunity for literally tens of thousands of people now who need new jobs in our Commonwealth and can have them if we act correctly. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Joe. Next up, we have Don Berwick, a pediatrician by trade. Don founded and grew a small nonprofit into the world's most significant healthcare improvement organization. He ran Medicare and Medicaid for President Obama. Now he's running for governor to fight for bold progressive values and make Massachusetts a beacon for the rest of the nation.
Thank you, Eric. Thanks, President Alexander and Greg. It's a pleasure to join you this morning. I very much look forward to this conversation. I am Don Berwick. I'd love your support to become your governor. As Eric said, I'm a pediatrician by training, but for 30 years an executive. I founded and grew a nonprofit organization, the Institute for Healthcare Improvement, that today has worked in over 70 countries around the world and in every state in the Union, working on healthcare improvement. Then President Obama asked me to come to Washington to run Medicare and Medicaid. That's the largest agency in federal government by budget, $820 billion. It's the lead agency for healthcare reform. The Republicans blocked me, as they blocked Elizabeth Warren. Glenn Beck called me the second most dangerous man in America. I nonetheless served. The president asked me to stay, and I did as a recess appointee for 17 months. And now I'd like to be your governor. And that's because with Washington in gridlock and a public that's losing trust in the ability of government to solve large problems, this country needs a beacon. It needs an example of a progressive agenda successfully executed for the people. Massachusetts can be that beacon. Look at us. We're the first state to make health care a human right. We're the first state to say you can marry the person you love. We have the best energy policy in the nation. We can be the example this country needs, a successful execution of progressive agenda. For me, that means an agenda founded on fundamental values of social justice, equality, and compassion in public life without any apology. There is a great myth in this country which is attacking the progressive agenda, and one component of that myth is that there is an inherent conflict between the interests of a socially just society and the interests of business in common. I do not believe that. Progressive agenda and good business walk hand in glove together. We need, for example, healthcare reform in this state, making healthcare a human right successfully executed. We need single-payer healthcare in this state. I'm the only candidate firmly behind single-payer healthcare. That will help business. It helps no business at all to have an incarcerated prisoner in a state prison or a county house of corrections at $42,000 a year instead of giving that person mental health services. A hungry child is a child headed for failure. That doesn't help business. We need to recommit to social justice, equality, compassion as fundamental values that will help our Commonwealth, our future, our communities, and our businesses. I want to have that fight. I'd love to be your governor. Thank you.
Thank you, Don. Next up, we have Evan Folchuk. Evan is the United Independent Party candidate for the governor of Massachusetts. A Massachusetts native and global business executive, Folchuk is calling for smart, brave reform of our politics, economy, and government. He currently lives in Auburndale with his wife Felicia and his 3 children.
Morning. I'm Evan Folchuk. I'm the United Independent Party candidate for governor, 44. I'm from Newton, live here in Auburndale. My wife Felicia and I have got 3 kids in the Newton schools. 2 of them are at Burr around the corner, and 1 of them is at Day. The last 14 years before running for governor, I was the president of a global healthcare company called Best Doctors that we grew from 9 employees to up over 600 employees. And I'm running for governor because I'm a voter who got tired of voting for the lesser of 2 evils, and I wanted to do something about it. And so I wanted to see leaders who pursued pragmatic, forward-thinking, new ideas, but most of the time what you heard was big government versus small, left versus right, high taxes versus low taxes. So I founded the United Independent Party based on some simple ideas, that everybody is equal, that everybody's civil rights must be protected, and that the government must spend our money wisely. Now, there are serious challenges we face for businesses and for individuals in our Commonwealth. The biggest one is the high cost of living in our state. And what's driving that is high healthcare costs, driven by the monopolistic consolidation of hospitals into giant hospital systems that just raise their prices, and a lack of housing, driven by a failure of state government to make it in the financial interests of cities and towns across the Commonwealth to produce more housing. These problems, in a world in which median incomes have been flat, stand in the way of business growth, and they are the important issues we face. I look forward to discussing all of that with you today. Thank you.
Thank you, Evan. Next up, we have Steve Grossman. Steve is the Massachusetts State Treasurer and is running for governor position in the state. He's committed to using the full potential of the Treasurer's office to help protect the public's money, help create jobs, and boost small businesses, and bring new standards of transparency and disclosure to state government. He has years of experience as a hardworking businessman with a sense of responsibility for the well-being of his colleagues and his community.
Good morning. I want to give an extra shout out to all of my friends from Lasell Village. My mother lives at Lasell Village. She's not here this morning. This may be one of the 2 days during the week when she still goes to work at age 92. She works with my sister handling accounts receivable, and trust me, you would not want to owe Shirley Grossman money. Because I had spent 35 years running a 104-year-old fourth-generation family business, Mass Envelope Company, now Grossman Marketing Group, when I began my run for treasurer, I held small business roundtables all over the state. And at every one of those events, I asked one question. What are the roadblocks and barriers you face as a small business owner, and how can we in government help remove or lower those roadblocks? And when I asked that question, the number one issue was access to capital. I've got a great idea, Steve, but I can't get the money I need. The big banks have shut the window tight. But it was the small banks, the local banks, the community banks, the credit unions that stepped in 2008 and 2009 and helped small businesses. So when I became treasurer and found that 60% of our money was sitting in banks in Europe, Australia, and Asia, I said something's wrong with this picture. Massachusetts taxpayers' money should be in Massachusetts banks to be loaned to creditworthy small businesses right here in Massachusetts to create jobs here in the state for the people of Massachusetts. So we created the Small Business Banking Partnership, a wonderful program, very simple. We'll put $10 million in any community bank in the state, including Village Bank in Newton, including Needham Bank in Needham, including Eastern Bank, our sponsor, which is the perennial small business lender, SBA lender. And we will put it, as long as you loan the money to small businesses with a focus on women-owned businesses, immigrant-owned businesses, and businesses owned by people of color. What's happened? In 3 years, 8,000 loans, $1.3 billion of lending, over $400 million of your money. Over and over again, you give businesses access to capital. You provide technical assistance to those businesses. You give them support, you get permitting and regulation to work properly, and we can create a small business sector that's second to none. That's the expertise I bring to this job. That's the promise I made to you. I've kept that promise for 4 years, Treasurer. I hope to have your support for Governor. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Steve. Next up, we have Juliette Kayyem. Currently running for the Massachusetts governor position, Juliette has spent her life making government work well. She has learned from serving 2 presidents and 1 governor that government's work matters all of the time. Whether fighting for women to access education or cleaning up and responding to the BP oil spill, Juliette is a proven leader.
Thank you. Good morning. My name is Juliette Kayyem. I have a confession to make to all you students sitting in the back row. We can still see you. I used to teach. You think you know. So come forward. It is great to be here and to introduce myself to you. My name is Juliette Kayyem. I've had a variety of roles in my career and a variety of obligations. I'm a mother of 3 children. I am a devoted wife. I have served most of my career in public service as a civil rights attorney in the Clinton administration, fighting for access to immigrants, women, African Americans, brought the first federal complaint in a bullying, in a peer-on-peer harassment suit. Later on, I got into public safety and Homeland Security, served as this governor's first Homeland Security advisor, and then for President Obama as Assistant Secretary for Homeland Security. That is about investments in our infrastructure and transportation, about making Massachusetts and the country stronger, more secure from whatever the risks are, whether it's economic downturn or climate change or drugs or guns. This is what I do, working both in state and federal government, and I bring those skills to this governor's race, a really exciting one. The challenges Massachusetts faces ahead are really opportunities for not me and not any of us. It's for you. It's for the next generation. And that is how I think about how to build Massachusetts strong and how to think about the role of the next governor. The state has the capacity to be the most welcoming, the most connected, and the most prepared for whatever comes our way with the right investments. So when I think about small businesses and my plan on small businesses, I focus on 3 important areas. The first is immigration reform. It really is connected to who we're educated and who can stay here and begin the sort of innovation and the creative industries that you all are a part of. It is something that the state government can get involved in. The second is I have been very forceful that I think that the state's non-compete clauses are a burden on our innovation and small business industries. I was the first one out sort of saying we just need to repeal them and rethink them. It's just, you cannot have 18th century laws for a 21st economy. And then the third is my commitment to infrastructure. I have been to 44 other states, over 50 other countries in my role serving 2 presidents and this governor. We are in a competition. We will win if we have the infrastructure, the transportation, and the housing authorities and the zoning rules that make us competitive in a global economy. That's how we should think about Massachusetts. We will win this fight against the 49 other states and a global economy. We just have to invest now. So thank you very much for your time. I look forward to the questions. My name is Juliette Kayyem. Thank you.
Thank you, Juliette. Our last candidate is Jeff McCormick, a graduate from Syracuse University. Jeff is running for governor of Massachusetts as an independent. He has a strong moral compass and will stand up against special interests that prevent real problem solving in government. Like the people he grew up with, he will work hard and honestly do what is right. He will put politics aside and deliver common sense solutions.
President Alexander, Greg, thank you again for having us here. My name is Jeff McCormick, and I am running as an independent. I'm from the other side of the tracks. I moved to Boston with $800 in my pocket, and I am an entrepreneur. and I finance entrepreneurs. All I've done my entire career is build small companies, hopefully into larger companies. Companies like Constant Contact, Boston Duck Tours in Boston. We built North America's largest biodiesel company out of a facility in Quincy. So I get it. I am on the front lines. Now, we have not only created billions of dollars of value, but we've created thousands of jobs in that process. And when you look at 1,000 companies a year, believe me, you hear a lot from entrepreneurs about the problems. Access to capital, is that an issue? Yes, it is, but it's the early stage capital that's very, very difficult. The shell game that you could do with banks is a different story because they're not changing the lending requirements. So I'm there, and I know the stories, and I know things that need to be fixed in state government. And for me, this is just an extraordinary opportunity to serve. So we've made a tremendous family sacrifice to do that. And if you take anything away about my message, it is Jeff for jobs. That's what it is about for me. Throughout the entire Commonwealth, creating a platform for job growth. We've done it in energy, we've done it in education, we've done it in biotech and in software. We can continue to do it. We have to harness the intellectual capital of the people of this Commonwealth. That is our growth engine. That is our number one asset. It's just the quality of our people, and believe me, around the Commonwealth, people are hungry to get at it. So if government just creates a platform where it's a friendly place, it's a place that wants to facilitate versus stop you from succeeding, that's what we need. And again, I do this, I live it. It's all I've done my professional career. Thank you very much, Jeff McCormick.
Hello. Well, thank you all once again. I did want to mention that we had invited Attorney General Coakley and Charlie Baker. They both declined. I know Charlie Baker is stocking trout today. I'm not sure what the Attorney General's up to, but we're delighted that we have the rest of the candidates here. And I want to start, as you all know, many of our downtown areas, including our village centers in Newton and downtown Needham, are hurting. And the real challenge, hurt the hardest, maybe in any sector, things come back up and down in the economy, our mom and pop retailers have really struggled in this economy. What would you do? How could the governor help? And anybody wants to go first? Don.
Well, the businesses, large and small, that I talk with, I've asked the same question to all of them, which is what would keep you in the state and allow you to grow? And they always give me the same answers. The answers are, first, get healthcare costs under control. They're really, really onerous in this state. We're the most expensive area in the country, in the most expensive country in the world. We don't need to spend that. I spent 30 years working on healthcare improvement. I know we can have better care at lower cost. That takes healthcare reform, and it's going to take payment change, which is one of the reasons that I think single payer is correct for this state. They also talk about onerous regulations, and I agree with them. I think regulations that protect workers and protect the public are necessary. But when I went to Medicare and Medicaid for President Obama, the first week I was there, I asked my staff to deliver to my desk 50 regulations to take away without hurting patients. They brought me 80. And I think simplifying the regulatory environment for businesses large and small is crucial to their ability to thrive. And finally, I mentioned innovation and investment. That applies to small businesses as well as large. I'm very excited by this N2 Innovation Corridor project here. This is the kind of investment we need government to be totally partnering with the public sector and to give entrepreneurs small amounts to begin with and build their businesses.
Thank you. And I'm particularly interested in retail, the mom and pop retailers, the brick and mortar retailer. How do we help them? Evan?
Well, there's a few things, and I think it's, once again, this cost of living issue relates to how much a business has to then pay its employees, and some of that is related to healthcare costs, and the failure to deal with the monopolistic consolidation of hospitals into giant hospital systems that raise their prices hurt retailers as much as any other kind of business. And the same thing with housing. Housing has been, by any real good economic analysis, a prerequisite for job growth. And housing in interesting ways. I'm talking about multifamily, denser housing in walkable communities where people will go down to a retail shop, like we have here in Auburn, where people use those businesses. The sprawl type development that's become characteristic of Massachusetts means you got to get in your car to drive places, makes it easier to go to a big box store to do your shopping instead of walking up the street to do that in that way. So I think it's time for us to change our mindset and just think strategically about how we build our economy and what we want our future to look like. It requires taking a pretty brave approach because it costs money to do these things and we have to do them.
Julia, you.
So just a couple additions to this. Having worked in state and federal government, the home rule is very difficult for regional planning and smart growth. 351 cities and towns of mayors, kings and queens all unto themselves. And so part of what a governor can do, looking at housing and regional transportation authorities, which really are at the crux of sort of whether people can work and whether they can move quickly and efficiently to be both employees as well as customers, has to take a different approach to how we budget, how we think about local funding and local spending. And what I have proposed is a much more regional approach to how we distribute funds from the State House and how we think about both smart growth against sprawling and the kind of living that people like, all of you in the back of the room are thinking about. I mean, there's a whole generation of kids growing up who don't think about owning a car. That's great. The obligation of the next governor is make sure you can move around efficiently to the mom and pop store so you can work there and start businesses.
Steve.
So I've been a proponent of what's called the Main Street Fairness Act for the last few years. Main Street Fairness Act would require internet companies all across America to collect internet sales taxes when they sell products in local communities. Massachusetts recently negotiated a deal with Amazon, and now Amazon is required to collect internet sales tax. If you own a bookstore in Newton Center, every time you open your doors, you're competing against Amazon to sell a book. And Amazon did not have to charge the 6.25% sales tax. Most internet companies that don't have a place of business in Massachusetts don't. So there's a piece of legislation that's actually passed the United States Senate, bipartisan. If you can believe it, something is actually happening in Washington on a bipartisan basis, something like 70 senators. It's still in the House of Representatives. If it passes, when it passes, it would simply require us to level the playing field. There are 500,000 retail jobs in Massachusetts. We need to protect those jobs. We've lost a lot of those jobs. It would also bring another $250 million of revenue into the state of these internet sales taxes, and I've said specifically I'd like to ask the legislature as governor to use that money, that $250 million of additional revenue, growing 8% a year, by the way, to fully fund our transportation and infrastructure plans. Because until we have 21st century transportation and infrastructure in this state, we will not attract the startup businesses and we will not get businesses to grow here. We really want to create jobs, 21st century infrastructure, Main Street fairness. Level the playing field for local retailers against the internet, they'll do just fine.
Jeff and Joe will give you a second, but raise of hands, anyone here opposed to an internet sales tax? Great. Joe?
I've run a startup, as I mentioned, for 7 years, and I've also traveled all over the Commonwealth and talked to literally hundreds, if not thousands at this point, of small business owners. And the three themes are healthcare costs, taxes, and permitting. With regard to healthcare costs, I think we have to keep coming back to this. We do have the highest in the world per capita, as Don has said. We have a highly wasteful, fragmented system. There are ways to make it more coordinated and save literally billions of dollars across the Commonwealth. We have our own health policy commission that's estimated we have $29 billion in wasted, fragmented care, inefficient care that doesn't add to medical outcomes. Having been the COO of Blue Cross and having controlled healthcare costs in the 90s, I know that we can do that. I know that we can work with our large institutions. Now that we have everybody insured and keep it affordable by moving towards coordinated care, we have to do that. The next governor has to know how to do that. And secondly, taxes. Some of my colleagues are talking about large, broad-based tax increases. This is a killer for our economy that still is not recovered. We cannot do that. We won't need to do that if we control healthcare costs. When the software tax came out a year ago, I was the first candidate to oppose it with a press release the day it came out because it went right at a new industry that we're trying to nurture, and it is unpredictable. That's the key. Predictable, stable tax structure so people can plan around it. And finally, one-stop shop permitting. I'm going to create a system to do that if I become governor. Thanks.
Greg, I think we've hit on most of the major issues here, but one just conceptual issue. When you talk about something like retail, you need to remember it is interconnected with everything else. It is connected to transportation. It is connected to housing, a major, major issue. So we've got to start thinking about the Commonwealth in regions, not just individual cities and towns and such, and get regions to work together, like you're doing here, by the way, with some of the development going on locally. That is a brilliant idea. I think you need to push it as hard as you can, and that you need to look at the whole 360, though, of healthcare, of housing, of transportation, to make cities as walkable as possible. Juliet's right. The millennials, they just want a different kind of lifestyle. There will be a reurbanization. There's no question about it. That's what they're looking for, and that's what we need to be mindful of as we consider retail.
Is everyone here anyone here opposed to raising the minimum wage? Okay. The minimum wage is going to be a big burden on these mom and pop retail stores that we're talking about. It's also a big burden on programs that run day camps and after school programs in those areas. Any idea how you help those folks while also raising the minimum wage?
Well, I question the level of the burden. I've spoken to a number of small business owners and asked them about minimum wage. They favor minimum wage. As one restaurant owner in Acton, she's already raised to above the minimum wage level. She says, my employees take that dollar down the street, they pay something at that store, that employee goes there, and they come back and eat at my restaurant. This is velocity of currency. It's basic economics, and a minimum wage plus earned sick time and proper supports to people at work seems to be not just fair, but economically really smart. And I think small businesses that are enlightened know that.
Anybody have a different view on that?
I mean, look, I support increasing the minimum wage. I think it's interesting to think that businesses are saying, I'm psyched to pay my workers more money. I don't think that's fair. At the end of the day, it's about the cost of living, because increasing the minimum wage by a few dollars is helpful to that person earning it, but it doesn't do much good if you're spending 30 or 40% of your income on rent, or if you're spending enormous amounts of money on your insurance premiums. So, we're already starting to talk about taxes, and we're deciding that cities and towns shouldn't have control over their own destinies, and it's totally wrong-headed. It's exactly how we got into the mess that we're in today. We have to be able to think strategically and thoughtfully about how to drive down the cost of living and doing business in Massachusetts. Housing is a prerequisite for job growth. Empowering cities and towns to make it in their economic best interest through funding education and transportation so that they can produce more housing is what will make it so that a person making the minimum wage can afford to live on it a lot more effectively than they can today. But things like the minimum wage are not a magical solution to our problems. They help, so I'm not against it, but we have to get at the underlying causes.
So we're actually talking about two different minimum wages on the table. There's the regular minimum wage, and then there's also the tips minimum wage, which is for restaurant workers and who earn tips. It's $2.63 now. The Senate plan would bring it up to as high as $5.50. Good idea, Joe?
Yeah, I agree with raising the tip minimum wage as well. And just to go back, this is one of those lines in the sand you have to draw. Studies have been on both sides of this issue forever, but we can't have people living in poverty working full-time in our Commonwealth, essentially with all of us benefiting from it. And it is true, as Don has said, that these are people that spend their paycheck and they are going to recirculate this right back into the economy, but at least not live in poverty. So one of those lines in the sand that is an enlightened Commonwealth we need to draw. We're not alone. Many other states will be raising it, hopefully the federal government will too. It's just wrong to have people living in poverty, working full-time. We shouldn't have that in our Commonwealth.
And the piece of legislation I actually have supported right along is the one the state Senate passed. It would raise it to $11. It's on the ballot at $10.50. Whatever the legislature negotiates, that's up to them. There is an issue about indexing the minimum wage to inflation. Minimum wage has been $8 an hour since 2008. Think of the purchasing power, people who are making $320 a week. That's $320 a week. Find me one person in Massachusetts who can live on $320 a week. So I believe that indexing to inflation is the right thing to do, because had we done that, we wouldn't be where we are with $8 an hour 6 years later. So I favor that approach as well, which is the one that the state Senate passed, and I hope that becomes law.
Anything different to add, or should we move on? Okay.
No, for the minimum wage, for indexing, and the notion of it being viewed as a burden, I think is a bad way to conceptualize it. I mean, I think it is we have to think about the long-term interests of our workers and the long-term interest of the state, and we'll have bipartisan support for it. We're in the middle of the noise right now, but this will happen.
Okay, one more question related to the retail community. In Newton, the Board of Aldermen is looking at legislation similar to that's been passed in Brookline and some other communities to ban disposable single-use plastic bags, basically these things. the retailers in Newton and other communities will tell you that they understand the concept, they understand the environmental impact, but it certainly would be fairer for them if it was a statewide initiative, so they don't have to compete against a store next door, a town next door where it doesn't have that plastic bag restriction. As governor, could we have your support on a statewide ban on plastic bag? Good idea, bad idea? Anybody?
Yeah, can we make it international? I mean, absolutely. I think these things are a menace to our environment, and we should get rid of them.
Anybody else? Any different thoughts?
It would have my support. I'm frankly, as a 40-year resident of Newton, I wouldn't mind seeing Newton lead here as well.
But Greg, one other issue that I think, we're talking about burdens on small businesses. I think we also ought to talk about things that can benefit small businesses. I think what you've done here in the Newton Needham Chamber in terms of promoting shop local first is a big plus, and to the extent that people who live in Newton and Needham shop in Newton and Needham as opposed to shopping in other communities or shopping on the internet, I think it could promote and the health and well-being of small businesses. Local communities will benefit when local residents stay in the local community and shop there and leave their resources there.
Okay. A question that President Alexander actually asked me to ask. Do you favor tax credits? The tax credits for the film business, are they worth it?
I'm happy to talk about it.
Okay, go ahead, Dan.
I think they are worth it because I think the creative economy is hugely important. I think the studies have shown that it's net maybe slightly beneficial to the state financially, but we have to think about these things in more than just dollars and cents. The tax credits that I worry about are the ones that go to these large publicly traded corporations who, like Intel is the biggest one recently in the news. It's a great company, but a $300 million tax break to keep the factory open that they then closed anyway leaves us as taxpayers feeling like suckers. And we need that money. We need that money to fund educational priorities, to make sure that more housing is built to drive down the cost of living. And when we're giving out deals like that to those types of companies, we've got, again, an incorrect approach to how economic growth is going to happen in the 21st century, which is driven by small and medium-sized businesses.
I want to piggyback on that, if I could. I do favor the tax credit for films. We just built new sound studios out at Debbins. We can be a center of filmmaking, and I think it's going to have a huge impact on the creative economy. I don't know how many students here are in the creative economy, but we employ over 100,000 people in our creative economy. If you think about the number of young people who go to colleges and universities in Massachusetts, and you think about where they're going to go, thinking about going to New York or Los Angeles, if we can create a viable creative economy here in the film industry and a variety of other ancillary industries, there will be thousands of young people who will stay here in Massachusetts long term, who will live here, who will prosper here, and will continue to build the creative economy. If you think about one of the reasons why you decided to live here and build a family here, and why we're satisfied with the quality of life in Massachusetts, it's because of the creative economy and because of the arts that are so much a part of our lives. The film industry is a significant part of that creative economy. That's why we should continue to build it. As long as the tax breaks produce jobs. Any tax break that is given to a company that doesn't produce the jobs should have a clawback provision attached to it, and we should have the right to take that money back from that company. You didn't create the 300 jobs, we want the money back. No tax break should be given out without a clawback provision.
Don Berwick and then Joe.
Yeah, we're going to have to find revenue to devote to fighting poverty, restoring health to our education system, changing the way we approach our transportation infrastructure. We have to find those revenues. The more I've looked at our tax code, the more I realize that a lot of the loopholes and incentives that we put into the tax system, exemptions, they're wrong. They're there because of inside baseball, and I want to reset to zero. I will restore tax breaks that actually do add jobs and that support the safety net, but otherwise we need to find that money and devote it to proper public use. A tax break for a company is a contract. If you want a tax break that assumes that on the condition that jobs will be created, then you owe those jobs, and it's got to be made absolutely clear for any tax breaks that we offer to any industry.
Okay. Jeff McCormick and then Joe Avalon.
Yeah, it's very important to know, too, that if you have a program that essentially comes close to paying for itself, you've got to look at the whole thing. And I will tell you that when you think of the creative community, it is not just musicians and performing artists and such. How about programmers? I'll tell you, we've hired thousands of them, and a lot of them love the fact that there is a real creative culture. And the more of that you have, the more of those kinds of people will stay here, instead of a number of them are going to Manhattan. I'll tell you right now, because of the edginess, because of the creativity in that area. So this is something, it is very, very important. And do not underestimate the value of the creative community. It is a sleeper. If you look at the early programmers of Apple and of Microsoft, they were poets, they were musicians, they were designers beyond just computer programming skills. So this is a really important area, but it's hard to quantify with the ROI.
I don't favor large tax breaks, especially for large companies to create jobs, because it doesn't happen. As we've already mentioned, how many times do we have to learn this lesson? Big companies don't stay here. They have lots of other things that they're balancing. They don't stay here on the basis of a presumed tax credit at the state level. I've run a large global enterprise, and I can tell you, we go where the work skills are. The fifth thing on our list is probably the local tax rate. And that's what we need to do to create jobs here, is use our educational institutions to make sure we have the right work skills. That's been my experience running a large global business. That's our experience here in Massachusetts, where we have about 3,000 employees, and we developed a program with Salem State. This is where we should be putting our efforts to create jobs and get them to expand here, not in tax breaks. I would say this, that rather than have a clawback for these, let's not give them out in the first place, because we know that it doesn't work. And we know that 5 years from now, we're going to be disappointed.
I disagree with that. I think that actually you need to put the film tax credit or the creative tax credit in perspective. So why do we do this as a state? Because we want the industries here and because we're at a competitive advantage. The film tax credit, I agree with Evan. I think the jury might be slightly out on the numbers, but what it means to the industry means a lot. We have not, look, we have not had a major television series filmed in Massachusetts in a very long while. Those generate hundreds and hundreds of jobs. It's something that we should grab for. But tax credits are neither good nor bad. You have to look at it in the perspective of what is the company that we want to come here and stay here. So that is why I'm also for tax credits for a green bank, for the green industry. I'm also for it for small industries related to military and defense. It's an area that Massachusetts is actually quite good at. So you can't just look at it in the context of is tax credit good or bad. It is what do we want to say as a state to each other and to the other states and to people that we want to come here and thrive here.
Joe, one more comment and we'll move on.
I just don't think we should be in the business of picking winners and losers and therefore handing out tax breaks for some, not others. We've learned this the hard way. We've learned it even recently with the battery company and a couple of other companies that have failed. The state shouldn't be in the business of picking winners and losers. And I think generally the state shouldn't be in the business of tax breaks.
Go ahead, Don.
Yeah, I would just want to comment on another use of public funds, but on tax breaks that I think is proven, and that's innovation investments. Like I was at Greentown Labs in Somerville, incredible place. There's only $600,000 or so of public funds that have gone in there. There are 40 small companies incubating in that space. They've raised $42 million of private capital, $130 million of public investment that Joe Curtatone has put into the Assembly Square project is going to generate 12,000 jobs and already has $1.5 billion of private investment. Smart use of public funds to provide the upfront small amounts of capital and innovation funding pays off handsomely. And if we're going to use public funds, I'd rather they were used there.
I'm glad we're talking about the creative economy. The Mass independent contractor laws, a lot of companies will tell you, really is a burden for companies in terms of hiring independent contractors, some of the strictest, if not the strictest in the nation. Would you change those? And just to give everybody in the audience, so we're talking basically software engineers, researchers, graphic designers, freelancers. There's restrictions on them that make it really difficult for companies to use them here in a way that's not as difficult in, say, California.
I mean, we have an issue because in many ways, from a legal perspective, there's no such thing as an independent contractor in Massachusetts. They basically become employees. And it does make it difficult for people that do that kind of work and want to be able to do it, to find it, and it also makes it harder for companies that want to hire those people as independent contractors to do it. So, these are the types of things when you think about how to think strategically about growing the economy, is taking a realistic look about what actually happens in the real world when you apply well-intentioned laws to real-world situations. So yeah, I would want to change that.
Anybody else? I'd love to get everyone's take, just even a show. To favor changing the independent contractor laws or opposed?
Well, I think I probably would change it, but it's a balance. I wouldn't remove all restrictions because otherwise people take advantage of it and don't offer health benefits or lots of other things that obviously they're going to need. And I don't think that's the right way to build our economy. So we may be too strict and maybe we can tweak it, but I certainly wouldn't remove it. And by the way, let me just ask one thing. Northern California is the software center of the universe, not here. It's not because they have contractors. It's not because it's a low-cost location. It's because they nurtured that labor community and they have the skill set. That's what we need to do here, and then we will grow businesses here.
Don, did you have it?
No, I agree with Joe.
Okay. Anyone else on the independent contractor? Mr. Treasurer, good idea, bad idea?
I agree with what's been said before. It's a balancing act. I think anytime we have rules and regulations that are excessively burdensome on business and it drives business growth, small business growth away, we've got to take a serious look at that to see whether or not it should be revised or reformed. So I think it's worth taking a serious look at, absolutely.
Okay, everyone here disagree with Governor Patrick's plan to eliminate tech non-compete agreements? You disagree with that? Want to explain why?
Look, I understand the desire to get away from non-competes. We've got a pretty thorough history with non-competes, and they're, for senior executives that are getting paid something to get a non-compete, I've been subject to a non-compete for many years in my business. We used to get them out all the time, and I think it's an appropriate part of running a good business, particularly when you're in a business where the value of the information that person will have access to during the time they're there is something they can take to a competitor, and it hurts businesses. So I think we have the right balance here in Massachusetts. The talk that you see in a lot with the governor's proposal on this makes it sound as if for low-level younger employees that they're being subject to this stuff. And when companies do that, I've seen it, where companies try to subject low-level employees to non-competes, they're not going to be enforceable in a court. Now, of course, you don't want to make someone go through that process, and people that do abusive things ought to be sanctioned for it. But I think as a tool of growing, especially high-technology innovation businesses, you need it. You need it.
I'll disagree with that. I think that whatever we can do to compete successfully with other hubs of innovation, we should be doing. The governor made it very clear when he made that announcement that he would make exceptions for trade secrets that you steal from companies, and also for customers that you steal. My company has had non-compete agreements, and to the extent that you bring a book of business to a company as a salesperson, when you leave, those businesses that you brought with you should be able to take with you. If the company helped you, you can't steal those customers. But I think to the extent that we are a big believer in the free flow of information and knowledge, and Massachusetts wants to be competing with California and other communities on a level playing field, I think we've got to do it. I think the time is long overdue to make that happen.
Can I add one thing? I'm sorry, just because he was raising the issue. California did get rid of these things. And the trouble is you've got Apple and Google now with an antitrust investigation because they both decided we won't hire each other's employees. So big companies especially know how to get around the law one way or the other. And so it is not true that just getting rid of the non-compete creates that wonderfulness.
I think it's a complicated subject. I think the simple answer of getting rid of them in Massachusetts is probably not correct. We have a very diverse economy here and different kinds of industries in which non-competes have different impacts. I've been on both sides of non-competes my whole career, and so it can be done in Massachusetts. Certain ones aren't enforceable if they are too restrictive in this state. But I can tell you if in the life sciences industry where their whole businesses are built around their trade secrets and the like, they have a lot more feeling about that than a software and small software startups where there's more of a free flow of software talent. So I think there may be a different balance that we could strike, but certainly the simple answer of let's just get rid of them is not correct for our state and the diversity of our economy, I don't believe.
There's no question in my mind, as I said earlier, that we are at a competitive disadvantage by having the onerous non-compete clauses. We shouldn't mix apples and oranges. There will still be prohibitions against the stealing of trade secrets, copyright laws, all the things that will protect industry and what they've invested in an employee. But our non-compete clause have gotten to the stage where a hairdressing chain can have a hairdresser sign a non-compete clause if that hairdresser leaves cannot work within 30 miles of the Supercuts or whatever the company is. It is so not where we need to be as a modern future-looking state. So just to be clear, what the governor has proposed, it is not that everyone can steal each other's secrets and go from company to company. It is present non-compete clauses are actually still enforceable. Trade secrets are still part of the law, antitrust, all the things that people are worried about. It is actually unleashing the innovation that has inhibited so many employees and makes them go to other states because of these geographic rules that they've been signing when they're 22 that don't let them start businesses within 30, 50, 100 miles of where the company is. That's the reality of what's going on, and the reforms are needed.
Great, thank you. We have a question. Do you want to comment? And when we'll start taking questions from the audience, so if you have a question, raise your hand and we'll get a microphone to you. Go ahead.
People need to remember, too, that businesses tend to evolve in clusters. There's a reason why biotechnology is so strong in Cambridge. We need free flow of capital, but you also need free flow of people, right? Again, getting back to it's about the intellectual wherewithal of people in this Commonwealth. So to Juliet's point, these are two different issues. When you're talking about intellectual property on one hand, and you're talking about non-competes. And it isn't as if we're lumping everything into one basket. So the devil is clearly in the details, and there are lines that you can draw. There is a difference between a senior CEO level, or C-level executive and the rest of the employee base. And we need to look at it that way. There is a smart way to put this in place where we don't get in our own way.
No question that the governor sent a welcome mat out to a whole generation of young people who are going to make serious decisions as to whether or not Massachusetts is where they want to live or some other place. That kind of welcome mat with the devil in the details, I agree, is exactly the kind of approach, and I applaud the governor for doing it.
I also support the governor's proposal. I think the velocity of the ability of knowledge to move around is very crucial to the economy of the state. And I think when there's a balance between the interests of very large businesses and individuals who want to go out and be entrepreneurs and carry their own skills forward, we need to help individuals thrive and do well. I grew a small nonprofit up to global size, and we valued our employees enormously. We wanted them to stay, but if they wanted to move on and go someplace and take the knowledge we'd built and use it elsewhere, we celebrated that, and I think that's a much more enlightened way to manage.
Greg, as a lawyer, I will say that businesses that try to get a 22-year-old kid to sign a non-compete agreement ought to be ashamed of themselves. They really ought to be. It's not enforceable. They know it's not going to be enforceable, and yet they're scaring a kid into doing that. So if we want to address that issue, I think it'd be great if the governor told young people, hey, understand something. When your employer shows up, trying to make you sign a non-compete, it's not worth the paper it's printed on. It's not worth the paper it's printed on. So deciding because we want to solve that problem by saying let's get rid of non-competes for the people for whom it's actually appropriate to have them is a mistake in policy. It's a failure to understand the reality of what these things are for. It may make good sense. You might get an audience of 22-year-olds who think that non-competes apply to them and say, wow, thank you for solving that problem for me. But the problem is the businesses imposing that upon them. So
Fantastic.
That to me is the right approach.
Okay, let's move on. Do we have a question from the audience? When you speak, please introduce yourself, tell us who you're affiliated with, and remember that the questions need to be related to the small business world or the economy. A question right up front here.
Good morning. My name is Peter Smith. I'm chair of the Needham Chamber of Commerce Environment Committee, and I'm very interested in finding out whether all of you will continue to support the incentives that the current administration has for small businesses to upgrade their energy efficiency and other incentives, or whether you would increase and add to the programs that the current administration has toward those goals. We work in the chamber to try to educate our members, especially our small retail members who benefit, since they have a really tight margin, typically, they can really survive better with these existing programs like the direct install program that the current administration is supporting.
Anybody thoughts on that? Joe, go ahead.
Well, first of all, I certainly support the goals of what the current administration has done and the first steps that it's taken. I don't think we're going to hit our emission targets unless we do something more radical than what we've done. And I've proposed a revenue-neutral carbon tax. I think this is the only thing that will actually change behavior on a large enough scale that would ultimately, and without harming the economy, and that would ultimately help us to hit these targets, these emission targets, and also actually bring into wide use the alternative energies that we are. So I think short of massive behavior change with something like that, we can have lots of targets and small programs, but we won't hit our targets. I think we do need to hit our targets. I think we're going to be in an irreversible position, as many of us believe, in 20 years, and we will really regret that we didn't take bold action today if we don't do so.
I also favor very bold climate action. I think we can be proud of the Commonwealth and what the governor's done with the Green Communities Act, our leadership in the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative, and in a number of statutes that he shepherded through. We're doing well, but we got to do a lot better. I applaud Newton Green Decade, by the way. I think it's a very progressive organization that's cutting a path for our proper behavior. A green commitment grows opportunities. It grows jobs. 80,000 clean energy jobs in this state, 5,500 firms, 24% job growth in the past 2 years. It's a sector that we can grow further. I also favor a carbon tax. It will add, according to the REMI study, 10,000 jobs to Massachusetts and grow our state economy by $500 million. I notice in our state that with respect to voluntary action alone, the stretch code, which is voluntary for our communities, more than half of the citizens of the Commonwealth currently live in communities that voluntarily adopted the stretch code. I would push further and further that and help small businesses adopt green technologies.
And I would like to talk about this sort of the other side, not admitting defeat, because obviously we want to remain committed to reducing emissions and green living. I think we are at a point now, I'm in the risk reduction business, right? And I think about our homeland where we can no longer deny climate change, but we can no longer deny its impact on the economy and small businesses. So I have proposed having a climate change adaptation lead in my office when I'm governor, because the challenge is you have 351 cities and towns, you have 18 different whatever secretariats, all trying to figure out how do we build stronger and more resilient. That's going to require zoning changes, it's going to require regional planning, and whether we're here in Newton, Needham, or you're out in the coast on the Cape, I don't want to be the woulda, shoulda, coulda governor. This Hurricane Sandy, we can't afford $6 billion of economic loss, right? So we have to be as smart on the green living as we now do on adaptation. It's not admitting defeat, it's just sort of smart governance at this stage.
So if you want to show leadership, you can do it at two levels. Small businesses can show leadership and benefit from it. Our own company, Grossman Marketing Group, switched all of its power manufacturing, printing materials, and envelope manufacturing, and we required our subcontractors to do it back in 2007 from traditional fuel, carbon-based fuel, to certified wind power. Every piece of printed material that we produce now, if the customer wants it, can say, made from 100% certified wind power. It's actually been a benefit to the company. There's a small cost of doing it, but a tremendous benefit. So companies can do it, and by making that shift, they can contribute in their own way to making us more relevant to a 21st century renewable energy environment. Second, I, as treasurer of the Commonwealth, chair the state's public pension funds, $58 billion. And a proposal was made by Senator Ben Downing from Pittsfield that we would divest from fossil fuel companies from the state pension fund over a 5-year period, as long as there was only a minimal cost to the pension fund. The most it could go down in value was 0.5%. And I support that, because I think if Massachusetts wants to be a national leader in energy efficiency, and we're #1 in energy efficiency, in renewable energy, wind and solar, and we're very highly rated in that regard, if we send a message to the rest of the world that we are willing to make some significant changes to become a state that can comply with its 2020 goals and its 2050 goals in terms of carbon emissions, we can actually create an environment where we will create more jobs. Don's right, 80,000 people working in 5,500 companies. The good news is that if you take those numbers and we continue to grow at 11 to 12% a year, we will create another 80 to 100,000 jobs in the clean tech industry over the next 10 to 12 years. That is a big deal, particularly for young people and millennials who we want to stay in Massachusetts.
So I think it's enormously important to continue the existing programs. I think there's a couple pieces of reality that are really important. We're hugely reliant on natural gas in Massachusetts for our energy needs. And in a state in which we have increasing demands for electricity, we're talking about building another gas pipeline across the northern part of the state. We don't have a strategic approach to dealing with our energy needs. We can't build an offshore wind farm off the Cape, which we've been trying to do for more than a decade. We're a country that used to be able to send people to the moon. We can't build a wind farm. So, and this is happening, by the way, in a state with a Democratic governor and a Democratic administration, where you would think that these things could get taken care of, and yet they do not. So what's needed is the ability to engage people on the reality of the challenges that we face of being over-reliant on a single source of generation capacity through natural gas, and making a more distributed, resilient, and reliable source of energy for our people.
Jeff, did you want to answer?
Yeah, it's worth noting, we built North America's largest biodiesel company, right? So this is the biggest one, starting with a plant down in Quincy, and it was a drop in the bucket. We cannot be confused about the volumes of what we're talking about. We need to have bold, longer-term goals. But instead of leapfrogging from where we are to those goals, we've got to get there incrementally. And I know this because we're doing this in a very, very high-growth company, but in a way that instead of having this permanent infrastructure that essentially has to be depreciated over 30 or 40 years, you can do it with a smart solution that works for now, that has a tremendous carbon footprint, and then ultimately, as the science catches up, and we have to remember, we're not there with some technologies to make it economically affordable and scalable for the benefit of small businesses, because many of them cannot afford a 4- or 5-fold increase in their energy cost. You're going to kill them. If this is about job growth, if this is about helping everyone, we're not going to get there by taxing them in that way. So let's get there with a step at a time, with a smart strategic plan. And that's something I think that is critical here.
Okay, Steve Grossman, and then we're going to move on.
Yeah, but two things. First, Jeff's right. I mean, natural gas is certainly a bridge and part of a portfolio strategy to a more carbonless environment, which we dream about down the road. We need to create ways in which we can store energy from wind and solar. We haven't figured that out yet from a technological standpoint. But up in Salem, right up in Salem, an agreement was made to build a new natural gas plant. Footprint Energy, which is a New Jersey-based company, agreed to build a new plant. But they made a deal with the Conservation Law Foundation and the state and the city of Salem that they would reduce their emissions little by little by little over a period of time from now until 2050, and they would take that plant out of service by the year 2050. This is a for-profit company that decided, with those restrictions, to build a new natural gas plant, presumably because they're going to make a profit. So the environment benefits, we reduce our carbon emissions, and we get a bridge to a more carbonless environment. That's a win-win for the people of Massachusetts, and it was a good deal for all of us.
Don, if you can keep it really short, please, so we can move on. Did you want to say
I just want to note the opportunities here. Conservation, which is the best way to get off carbon, is a tremendous growth potential for us. We've hardly begun, even though we're ahead of most other states. We won the award 3 years in a row as the most energy efficient state, but we could do better than that on conservation. The other is wind power. There's something like 5 gigawatts of wind expandable in the Massachusetts control. If we will get courageous about exploiting the wind resource, it's a way to go much faster. As governor, I would lead in that direction.
Great, thank you. So I wanted to actually ask you now about something that's really important to the Chamber, and I thank some of you for already alluding to it. As you know, and many of our members here know, the Chamber has been working with the city of Newton and the town of Needham on an economic development issue, developing the Newton-Needham corridor. We call it the N-squared corridor, an area of the office park over by Wells Avenue, and the office park over where the Needham Sheridan is, and some surrounding streets, on attracting innovation sector companies there. There's already some there. TripAdvisor made a big stand by deciding to build their marquee building in that place, and other companies are there. We feel very excited about this. We think there's an opportunity for businesses that are in Kendall Square in the Innovation District. They're looking to grow. They can't grow there. They're outpriced there. We think this is a great opportunity. We think the inner suburbs in general is a great opportunity. Business owners tell us the big challenge is getting the workforce there, so you need workforce housing, getting transportation there. There's not a lot of public transportation, getting bike lanes. Which one of you is going to help us the most make this a possibility? Go ahead, Don.
Well, this is about smart growth, and it is a systems problem. any governor that says we'll add jobs by doing one thing, or candidate isn't telling you the truth. It's a systemic issue. But this is a wonderful opportunity. Congratulations on N Squared. I think it's a terrific thing for the state. Now let's double down. It involves thinking about all of the things that help create an attractive community where people want to live. When people want to live there, businesses want to come there. When businesses come there, jobs grow there. And that is transportation. It's the safety of the infrastructure. It's a good school system, which we have here. It's smart, dense housing so that we can actually have housing of varying costs for people so that a mixed community can live there. We have to think systemically. When that happens, things grow. I mentioned the Assembly Square area. It's an amazing thing where thinking systemically like that will add thousands of jobs to a community about the size of ours. I think it's a tremendous opportunity for the state to invest in supporting.
Evan Falchuk, how are you going to help us?
Well, housing, number one, and it's true, we need more of it, but the way you get it is by funding Chapter 70 appropriately. As it works today, if you build multifamily transit-oriented housing, it actually is more costly to you as a city or town. The state needs to update the funding formula to make it growth neutral, at the very least. That's how you end up with more housing built. And I think there are some interesting things that have been done in other communities, like in Andover with these reverse commute shuttles to make it more tied into existing public transportation, because many of the workers that are coming out here are going to be people that are currently living in places like Assembly Square and other locations, and they need to get into public transportation in order to get to Newton. So those sorts of shuttles, whether it's put together by the people in the office park, or it's a public-private partnership, or using, they've done it or looked at doing it in places like Westford, using the buses from the Council on Aging. There's a lot of creative things that can be done. It's a question of making it happen, but it starts with addressing the issue of funding for education.
I think this is smart growth, but it's smart growth that's kind of in evolution. And the most tangible, immediate thing to do to really get N Squared on the road, and I really applaud that idea, is the infrastructure. So I think the Kendrick Street ramp, I think the next governor needs to be committed to, and also I think shuttle buses from the T is the way to get young people to be there. And then the rest of it does start to take care of itself. And obviously you need a plan, a smart growth plan, to make sure that you can fill in the environment that young people want to stay in, perhaps the housing is there as well. But the first thing is to get people there. It's an out-of-the-way place, and you need to make sure that you can get people there, and that is where the government can help immediately.
So I would continue its status as EDIP, the Economic Development Incentive Program, and that's yet another tax break to begin to get a focus on economic growth in N2 so that it prospers. As I said in my intro, I get smart growth, I get regional planning. I've been asked to do that through a lot of my career, sort of breaking through the boundaries. So I won't address that now. I think the one area everyone's saying transportation or housing or infrastructure, all true. What inhibits those is our antiquated zoning laws. We have zoning is actually very much controlled by state government. We do have a home rule state, but even for Boston to make sort of insignificant changes to its zoning rules, it has to go back to Beacon Hill. I would work with the mayors. You've done a lot in the Needham Newton area in terms of trying to get some of those changes to those zoning laws to give you more flexibility, to give localities more flexibility. We've got to begin with the legal infrastructure that prohibits that kind of regional planning that is so creative when you actually get out in the state. And I would work to get those changes done on Beacon Hill.
Jeff McCormick, can you help us?
Yeah, just one nuance here. I'm going to give you some free advice, which is worth what you pay for it, by the way. Having done this with dozens of companies and having the certain age groups, one thing you need to introduce into the conversation is 3-bedroom rentals. And there's a reason why 1- and 2-bedroom are so popular. It's because of the economics of it. But from a practical perspective, and again, this is dozens of companies. I have a lot of experience with people that hit that point in life because of having children and expanding families. They're not ready to buy a place yet. I mean, think about this area. It's a lot of money. It's a big down payment. So someone, if anyone here is involved in the actual planning and on the boards and such, I would encourage you to try and work that into the conversation, because you're going to be able to keep really good people for a longer period of time until such point as they can really be permanent residents of your community.
Steve Grossman, can you help us?
Well, look, one of the biggest challenges we have is how do we keep that talent pipeline filled? How do we keep our college graduates and those are master's degree candidates and recipients. How do we keep them here in Massachusetts? And if you ask, we created a Young Professionals Advisory Group in our campaign because we wanted to know what 18 to 35-year-olds thought were the biggest challenges and issues they faced, and some of the solutions that they believed were appropriate. And housing comes up over and over and over again as a big roadblock or barrier. And this is not only affordable housing, but this is middle-income housing. And we've had a hard time making that all work. So to me, number one, you have to fully fund the way forward, the governor's transportation infrastructure plans, and the legislature only got us halfway there. We've got to find a way to do it. That's why I mentioned internet sales taxes and allocating that money directly to transportation. And whether it's buses or flexible transportation, whether it's bicycle paths that are more usable and more friendly, we've got to create an environment where young people say, yes, I'm going to stay here. I'm going to live, work, play, and stay here. I'm going to be part of one of those innovation economy companies because I can make a good living, I can have housing that's more affordable. The imbalance, the supply-demand imbalance has created housing that is just too expensive. That's why we need to double the historic tax credit in the Commonwealth from $50 to $100 billion. And it's why we've got to take public land, which is held in public trust, owned by the state, owned by the T, owned by Massport, and turn that into more affordable tracts of housing for younger people and for middle-income housing. That's the way we keep the talent pipeline filled, so when you finally finish the projects that we're talking about here in Newton Needham, you've got enough well-trained, well-educated people to grow those companies.
Thank you all. Questions from the audience? Right back here. And I have a second microphone.
Thank you. I'm Joy Babcock, and I'm a small business owner in Watertown. And one of the things I'd like to have you comment on is the gas tax proposal and indexing it to the cost of inflation. And it just seems to me that when they add so many taxes, everybody just passes it on to the poor consumer. And when you're talking about gas, that impacts every aspect of our lives, both as small businesses and as residents. Whatever product or service we use has to get to us. The majority of it comes to us via the roads, and it has to get to us somehow. And it just seems to me that, and I believe that there's an effort underway to have it repealed, and that whole thing when the gas tax was passed didn't seem to be transparent, and I don't recall reading a lot of things that it was being indexed to the cost of living.
Thank you, Joy.
Thank you.
So the gas tax was 21 cents. The legislature, in that package that they passed, which is to fully fund transportation, that was the principal goal, increased the gas tax from 21 cents to 24 cents. But they also recognizing that we have to find a way to realize roughly $10 to $12 billion over a 10-year period to fully fund all of the transportation investments that we need to make. This is new rail cars in the T, deferred maintenance, the Green Line to Somerville and Medford, rebuilding South Station, South Coast Rail, regional transit authorities. In other words, a full transportation package that serves every region of the state and not just selectively. So $1 billion over the next 10 years will be realized by indexing the gas tax to inflation. Even at 24 cents, we're the second lowest gas tax in New England, and New Hampshire is proposing to increase theirs, so we would actually be the lowest. If you increase the gas tax by 3%, let's say inflation is 3%, you'll get from 24 cents to 27.8 cents over the next 5 years. If we don't realize that $1 billion over the next 10 years by indexing the gas tax to inflation, we cannot possibly pay for the transportation and infrastructure investments that we all agree, I think, are critical to attract and grow businesses. So I hear you loudly and clearly, and some people think the legislature should have to vote on it every single year. I do support it. It's on the ballot to repeal it. I oppose the repeal, and I think it's in the best interest of the state to keep that gas tax indexed to inflation.
Everyone here oppose the repeal of the gas tax?
Yes.
Okay, Evan, go ahead.
So Steve's right on the merits of the policy. Two things I want to say. One is that we have to pay for the government we say we want. We have to. And the state has systematically underinvested in our transportation infrastructure for decades. We can't keep kicking the can down the road. The second thing, though, is that I think you're right as well, that the legislature and the governor did a really poor job of communicating with the public about what they were trying to do. I think most people, when you ask them about that whole transportation package, which was a really important piece of legislation, the one thing they know about it is the question you raised, which was about the gas tax. That's a really unfortunate failure of leadership, of engagement, and of communication, and it reflects a style of government that we've become accustomed to in 21st century America. We have to respect voters and engage with them and explain what it is that we're doing and act accordingly.
So I agree with the transportation agenda. We're way behind because of the massive cost overruns of the big dig, and we have catch up to do. I did agree with the gas tax increase. I don't agree with indexing it to inflation. I think this is a backdoor tax. I think people resent it. I think they responded just the way you articulated it. And I think this is, if we have a case to make, and I think the legislature and the governor do, then we should go back as we need to and perhaps increase the gas tax when we need to and make that case. I think the idea that somehow this is kind of an out-of-control tax that's going to continue to grow is something that's going to get rejected by the voters, and I don't blame them. I don't believe we should be indexing taxes.
You know, one thing we need to get away from as well is this whole concept of we desperately need capital for something, in this case transportation, and it's that and it's taxes. How about thinking smart? How about thinking out of the box? I've been trying to develop something to take garbage and convert it to gasoline with technologies used other places in the world, all the money coming from Wall Street, and the state cannot get out of its own way. That's a really smart thing to do, and by the way, you do it with tremendously favorable economics, and it's so environmentally sensitive, which is kind of from where I'm from in upstate New York. That's how I think. You know, let's think about conservation. Let's think about what we can do with our brain power here. And it's things like that that we've got to start doing, as opposed to this binary conversation we're always having. We need money for this, it's about taxes. Let's be as smart as we can be.
Yeah, I hear you. I understand the discomfort. But first, remember, the gas tax was not raised. I think it goes back to 1993. It's a very old level, and so we've had a bit of a free ride on the gas tax not being increased in quite a long time. Beyond that, though, this is a matter of public trust, it seems to me. What's behind your question and your concern is not just that it's a burden, but you want to know that you get value for money. And I think having government properly managed, so every nickel of public funds that are acquired from the public it comes back in redoubled value is a key issue. My background as a manager tells me that we've got to make sure to treat the citizen as a customer and regard every single dollar invested by the public in government to return value from government. And I think that level of management is absolutely key. One other comment on the gas tax. It's a frail transition support to transportation. We need the money now, but in the long run, it shouldn't work. And that is because we need to get off carbon. We need public transportation. We need electric vehicles hitting and I think exceeding the 25% goal we now have with the 8-state initiative. And if we're smart, we'll be using less gas, and that'll be a less reliable source of revenue. So we're going to have to solve that problem. And I think it's a problem I want to have us face. I want less gas used in this country.
Thank you. Juliet, do you want a last word on this? Or
Oh, sure. I mean, no differences. And I thank you for your question. I mean, I am for the gas tax because we had spent a lot of time not raising it. And I'm for indexing because I think revisiting this every couple of years does no one any favors. But look, the gas tax there's ways in which a governor can drive good behavior, and that's a good thing. The more that people use public transportation, walk, live a different way, the better off our society is and the better off the world is. And the gas tax is one way to try to do that. And the obligation of a governor is to make sure that our transportation system can actually satisfy the larger quantities that we want. You guys are Green Line people. I'm sorry. I mean, you know, I don't know what else to say. I mean, the idea that we don't have more efficient public transportation in our urban area is absurd. And so we have to think of strategic investments in modernizing not just the rails, but also if you look at other countries, the quantity. It's just, we can't have people waiting 12 minutes in between every red line during rush hour. It's just not a way we can live.
Next question. If you could ask you to keep your questions brief so we can move through.
Thank you. Good morning. I'm Chris Teach. I work at Needham Bank, and I'm on the board of the Needham Chamber.
One of the issues you brought up is the interest in trying to keep young people here and the affordability of it. One of the things I experience is that a lot of kids, not at college level, but at high school level, are finding it more and more difficult to even afford higher education. So they end up leaving before they're even given an opportunity to be educated here and to stay here. And I was curious your opinion as the rising cost of education, higher education, and is there something that you could do about it?
Go ahead, Joe.
So I completely agree with you. As you heard earlier, one of, I think, a major thing that we need to do in the Commonwealth is to make sure that our community, state college, and vocational schools, as also, have the right skills that will bring new jobs here and provide opportunity for those young people. That means that it has to be affordable, and we've underinvested in that over years. It appears that we need to make sure that we cover about half of the true cost of actually the community and state college budgets, and that would then allow for tuition rates to stay within range. And I think we need to do that, and we didn't do that for many years. We have done it for the last 2 budget cycles. I think the next governor needs to make sure we commit to doing that in the future. Otherwise, why have the system? If the system is not affordable for our people, our young people, to work and hopefully stay in the, go to school and then hopefully stay in the state and work, then why have the system? So I certainly agree we need to fund it at the appropriate level that keeps the tuition in range. I clearly agree with with Elizabeth Warren's efforts to try and make sure that the debt service that is being paid is not resulting in profits of some sort going even to the government, let alone anybody else. So if we can lower interest rates, that would be very good too. Unfortunately, that's more of a federal issue.
Steve and then Don.
So our students are drowning in debt. Debt has now crossed the $30,000 mark on average, and a lot of families are having second thoughts about whether they can afford it. So I have proposed freezing fees and tuitions for the next 4 years at our public colleges and universities. But there's another ingredient to all this, and that is internships. If we're going to motivate and give young people who are in college or in graduate school some sense of excitement about staying in Massachusetts long-term, internships, paid internships, to me, are the vehicle to do it. And I proposed creating 5,000 summer internships for college students and graduate students. 5,000 summer internships at $500 a week, 10 weeks, would basically be a $25 million a year program. I'm going to challenge the business community to pick up half the cost because it's in their interest to have well-educated, motivated young people to stay in Massachusetts long-term. The state can pick up the other half. Paid internships, I don't know how many of you, if I asked for a show of hands, how many of your children have had unpaid internships? My guess is most of the hands would go up. My wife Barbara saw a cartoon in the New Yorker recently. It showed 2 Roman consuls sitting on chaise lounges around a pool. And one of them looked at the other and said, let's call them interns. The word slave is so demeaning. I mean, we have kept our young people, our college students, our graduate students in indentured servitude by insisting that they could have unpaid internships is wrong. Paid internships are going to motivate those young people to stay here long term, to take jobs with those companies, filling this talent pipeline. If you've got 120 to 140,000 jobs unfilled right at the moment, jobs that we need to fill in our innovation economy, where a greater percentage of our economy is made up of people who work in the innovation economy than in any other state, 40% of our total workforce. We've got to find ways to fill that pipeline. It's about transportation, housing, education, summer internships, making education more affordable, all of those things.
Great, thank you. Don and then Jeff.
I think one of the smartest investments this Commonwealth can make, and the smartest investment of governor's time, is the rejuvenation of the public higher education system here. There are 29 state colleges and universities. More kids in this Commonwealth go to them than to the private sector education organizations, even though there are far more private ones. And 80 to 90% of the kids that go to public higher education stay in the state. It's a tremendous opportunity for the state. And yet what we've done over time is decrease support to the facilities and infrastructure, decrease supports to faculty, and allowed that system to be eroded instead of built up. I think it should be world-class, and I'd aim to have this Commonwealth be the envy of the world with respect to its public higher education. I can't think of a smarter investment.
Yeah, we also need to remember, we need to use technology smarter. That will actually decrease the cost of education. We do this in portfolio companies. We have one that teaches millions of people math throughout the United States. It's used in 41 different states. We have another one, hundreds and hundreds of colleges and universities, and knowledge-based companies like the Amgens and Genentechs of the world, like the Microsofts and Apples of the world. They use it. Why? Because they've got programmers that are distributed throughout the world, and they need to work together. So if they can do it, clearly it can be done in high schools and in colleges and universities, and that decreases the overall cost. And that's a big issue here. So we have to, education, we've got to think of it in much more of a scalable format, so people hit the ground running, and that also so that there's a job at the other end. That's why we're educating people.
Thank you.
Let's look at the jobs.
We've got part of the issue is that there's a lot of emphasis on the four-year degree, and not as much on making sure that community colleges and vocational programs get the kind of funding that they need so that kids that want to pursue that can. So one of the things that I've proposed is saying that if you're a graduate of a Massachusetts high school and you want to go to a vocational school or a community college, that the state would pay for that for 2 years. They've been working on something like that in Tennessee. I think it's something that we should do as well. The value of higher education is enormous, and the return on investment from the state's perspective to help people that want those careers to be able to pursue them is great, and it's a great thing to do. So I very much support that.
Thank you. Juliet Kayyem.
I have 3 kids entering the age where my husband and I are starting to think about it. We look at the prices. Their last name is Barron, and we have an idea that they'll get a Disney show called The Barron Band, and David and I won't have to worry about it anymore, because when you look at this price tag, there might not be a better solution. And the truth is, what we need to focus on, and this is an issue that is impacting middle-class families in a way that makes them feel like they are close to the poverty line, because we're not making enough to not worry about it. But we are making enough to not get some of the benefits of the scholarship. So this is the issue that is really impacting a lot of middle-class families. And so just quickly, what I want to focus on is the skills gap. One of the ways to relieve the burden of debt is to make sure that people are employed. We have a gap. We know what that gap is between what our kids are learning and what our workforce needs are in biotech, nursing, medical, education. A governor needs to focus not just on reducing the price, but ensuring that the schools are delivering the skills that will keep our kids here so that they are employable at the other end. It is putting the pieces together from the front end.
Okay, we've moved to the haiku round. We've got brief questions and brief answers. Haiku or limerick answers are best. Next question. Where's the microphone? Go ahead.
My name's Karen Masterson, and my husband and I became the new owners of Johnny's Luncheonette in Newton Center recently. We've had businesses, and we're thrilled to be here. I think Newton should get the award for nicest city ever, anywhere. We recently came from Lexington. I've also had a business in Framingham. My concern as a small business is this. I've watched the town centers at some of the places we've been at get eaten up by banks and chains. The 14th Bank was going into Lexington Center in a 3-block radius when we left. It takes the vitality and the resilience out of the center. As a small business owner, my concerns are sort of twofold. If we are on the same economic model as those banks and chains, we can't compete. Landlords, the subject of the landlord never seems to come up. Who owns Main Street really, really matters. And if we have young people coming up or middle-aged people who are business owners, we need to have space to do our businesses in. And I know one of the major restaurant brokers in the area said 95% of the reason restaurants leave has to do with lease and rent issues. So the other part of this is that the economic model that our business has always been, which is putting tens of thousands of dollars into farms, into local fishermen, that's never in the equation anywhere. And yet the ripple impact, and studies bear this out, the Andersonville study, Stacy Mitchell, Michael Schumann have done multiple studies around the impact of local business and their significant contributions to local and regional economies.
Karen, it's a really important topic, but can you just get to the question so we can...
So as governor, would you look at how do you change the economic model so that small business people can have access to the spaces where people want them to be? I mean, there's a real conundrum there, and I don't know what we can do at the political level, but something's got to change.
Brief answers. I know that's tough, but go ahead.
Zoning, it's zoning. I mean, it is giving communities that want a vibrant Main Street the capability to keep quantify the types of industries that they want. And we don't make it easy for Main Street to do that, we being the state.
Evan.
The issue of the cost of living in Massachusetts, I keep talking about it because it touches on exactly the things that you're saying. The economics of a big chain of any kind, they can survive in our current economic climate. As a smaller business, it's a lot harder for you. So it should be no surprise that you see the kind of things happening that you're saying because our policies are designed to produce it. So we have to change it by changing the economic model of healthcare, stopping the monopolies in the hospital market, and making housing production a very, very high priority.
Okay, thank you. So anyone else want to add to this? I know we've discussed this a little bit earlier. All right, one last question from the audience. Gentleman in the white shirt right here.
I'm Barney Freiberg Dale. I own and operate a small business. I was amazed a few minutes ago that all 6 of you talked about education without mentioning once the idea of apprenticeships. One of the world's most dynamic economies these days is Germany, and a foundation of their successful economy is apprenticeships. Working together not just with businesses and government, but also organizations like the Chamber of Commerce, only they call it different names over there. Can you please address that?
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. I'm very familiar with Germany. I wanted to start with vocational schools. We need to bring more vocational education back into the traditional schools. We've gotten away from it. Half of the so-called scientific jobs in the state don't require post-high school education, and those are good middle-class jobs. The bridge from there to good work is often an apprenticeship, and that means that the local schools and the vocational schools or educational departments need to connect with local businesses. I think that's the reality of creating the equivalent of apprenticeships, and I think that could work and does need to work.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. I'm very familiar with this. In Switzerland, 70% of the 15-year-olds in Switzerland are not just in school, they're also in a business. And that's one of the explanations for the very, very low unemployment rates there. It's a very progressive thing to do. In the organization I ran, I must tell you, we always had 5 or 6 Northeastern cooperative students in our office. And today, among the 130 employees in that organization, I think about 50% of them are former Northeastern co-ops. It was a win-win-win-win, and I totally support your point.
I'm glad you raised it. I look for best practices and good models. There is a VocaTech school in Billerica, Shawsheen, which probably is known as having the highest percentage of its high school students in the VocaTech in apprenticeship programs, and that's a model that we should absolutely expand. So thank you for raising it. Look, the reason Northeastern University has become one of the premier universities in the world is because of their co-op program, because you actually have experiential education. Employers are looking for students who are problem solvers, who know how to work in teams, and who have had some life experience, and there's no better way to do it than apprenticeship. So thank you for raising it.
Did you want to say something?
Greg, he's had his hand in the first row. He's had his hand up every single time. So if we could take one more question, it's up to you.
Go ahead, really brief.
Thank you.
You have to answer it now.
Now I'm going to put you on the spot. No. First of all, thank you all for being here. My question is about single-payer health care that you raised earlier. As a citizen and resident of Massachusetts, I love the idea. As a small business owner, I'm Bill Kuhlman, broker-owner of Kuhlman Residential Real Estate in Needham. But as a small business owner, I'm completely in the dark about what the pros and cons are of single payer or Medicare available to all. So if you're for it or against it, I'd love to hear what's good and bad for businesses.
Great, thank you. We can take brief answers, and then the candidates who can stay, please do stay and have an opportunity to talk after
With
Don.
single payer, you win. We almost all win. The administrative costs will fall substantially. Right now, administrative costs in the Commonwealth are 15, 16, 17% of the insurance system. We have 10% for the mixed market, but it's higher than that. I ran Medicare. Our overhead was 1%. Single payer will immediately restore money to the state budget and to private pockets, including yours, by reducing healthcare costs.
If you
the second
agree,
thing it does, it allows the single payer to stand up for your interests. Right now, there's no consolidated voice on behalf of patients and families and communities and businesses like yours. Single payer can do that. I did it every day as head of Medicare, and I'd like to see the state do it now.
If you share Don's view, can you just raise your hand? And someone who disagrees, Evan?
No, I'm against it for a lot of reasons. One of them is it doesn't get at the underlying cause of our problem, which is the monopolistic consolidation of hospitals into giant networks or systems that raise their prices. So it's a little bit like when people say, hey, let's get the Olympics in Massachusetts because that way we can get a new subway system. Say, well, if you want a new subway system, build a new subway system. Don't get the Olympics. So we have to change the economic model of healthcare, stop mergers, make an all-payer fee schedule. If you just got rid of 5% of the wasted cost in hospitals, which would happen if you put the risk of that on the hospitals, that's $2 billion a year.
Okay, any other comments here?
Yeah, it's not Medicare for all. It's actually mass health for all, because it would be a state takeover of healthcare. We build up a huge state bureaucracy to essentially administer that. The state has a lot of trouble running when it's running right at the moment. We have a system in which everybody is insured. It's not perfect. We need to keep it affordable. We can do that whether it's single payer or multi-payer. I think we should keep with the system that we formed 7 years ago in which everybody's insured and work on creating more efficient patterns.
Steve Grossman.
So, single payer or a public option may very well be a solution that could dramatically reduce the cost of health care for small businesses and consumers. And I've said publicly that as governor, I will lead a public conversation. Where it's going to lead, how this is going to work, I don't think anybody knows, but a governor has to lead a major public conversation. It's got to be right at the center of this public discussion. Healthcare is taking up 42% of our state budget. It's crowded almost everything else out, the arts, the environment, and everything else. We don't get a grasp on that. We're not going to be able to fund all the things we've been talking about this morning. That would be tragic.
Juliet or Jeff, you want to add anything to that?
You know, it has been an issue on the Democratic side for some time, and I just think it's the obligation of people who are pushing it to say how we're going to do it, because we do have 98% health care coverage. We have a legislature that will not be receptive to it, and so I just think the devil's in the details. It's a good idea, except your question is fantastic, and so that's why I, like Joe, am committed to making the system that we have now work, reducing cost, and talking about public health.
Jeff, you get the last one.
Expect a hybrid solution. We know government is not well known for running efficiently, but we also know that we need to get it under control. And there are some things that there is low-hanging fruit to save, not just tens, but hundreds of millions of dollars. So you're going to have to see both.
Thank you all very much. Let's give them all a big round of applause.
I'm Steve Bloom. I'm the acting Vice President for Academic Affairs, and I just want to take a moment to thank you all for coming. It was a nice twist of fate that the conversation towards the end came to the cost and value of higher education, something that is near and dear to our hearts here at Lasell, where we're working hard to keep the cost down and increase the value. One of the ways we do it is with something we call connected learning. Connected learning is doing the work of the field in the classroom. This may have looked like a political forum to most of you, but this was a classroom here at Lasell. We're in the middle of our Connected Learning Symposium Week, where our students are showing and displaying their work, showing how they do professional work in their classes by partnering with organizations like yours and doing real-world projects. And there's nothing more real than a situation like this where they came to see what small business owners are interested in, what the politicians are talking about, and really got to wrap their heads around it today in a way that just enhances what any kind of textbook could teach them. So we thank the candidates for coming today and providing this wonderful opportunity to all of us, and especially our students. I want to thank Professor Hector Iweka for organizing this event, our President, Michael Alexander, the Chamber President, Greg Riedman, and Tori Reichenbach, the student who was in charge, Eric Connolly, who was our Master of Ceremonies, and all of you for coming today to Lasell. This was an exciting forum. We're looking forward to a great campaign. We hope the candidates will come back here to Lasell during the rest of the campaign to talk with us and meet with us. I want to thank you all for helping us make the classroom the real world here at Lasell College.